I'm Grace Kielstra. If you're new here, welcome to the MetaStellar YouTube channel. MetaStellar is a speculative fiction magazine publishing science fiction, fantasy, and horror works. On this channel, we post book reviews, short story readings, and, of course, author interviews. If you enjoy the video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and of course, feel free to either join the channel or we have a Patreon you can support us on if you're interested in our mission of publishing short fiction by new and emerging authors. Hi everyone. I'm here today with Nicholas J., one of MetaStellar's authors. Nick is a conservation-minded urban planner living in Atlanta. His fiction has appeared in The Dread Machine, Hyphen Punk, Tree and Stone, and of course MetaStellar, among others. He enjoys his time most with either pen, violin, or map in hand, sometimes all three at once. It's a pleasure to have you here, Nick.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's been lovely. So I noticed that on your website, for each of your short stories, you tend to notice certain things which influence them, and often from very diverse sources. I was wondering if there are any specific books or specific writers that have broadly influenced you throughout your time writing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my first encounter with speculative fiction in general was I took in 10th grade, we focused on Latin American and world literature. And I read a story by Julio Cortázar called The Night Face Up. And it was like, the just like explosions went off in my brain of the way that the story was constructed. The entire thing leads up to a big twist at the end that makes everything make sense, and it just is very fantastical but also dark. And I think I started gravitating towards those kinds of stories and narratives after I read that. We also read a lot of Garcia Marquez, a lot of Borges, and other South American writers who
Hmm.
kind of play with weirdness and wonder in equal measure. So I was really drawn to that. And then I always have had kind of um, I guess, a love for stories where there's something special about the main character. And so I found, I think it's still my favorite series to this day is the His Dark Materials trilogy, because it's like this whole world around these two kids that are predestined in some way to be together, but also apart, and they hold some larger significance in this small piece of the world. I think it anything that kind of expands your understanding of what is possible while also being grounded in something very emotionally with a strong emotional connection. It's just like the sweet spot for me. So I don't know that there's any like one author in particular. I try to read as widely as I can.
Hmm.
Um, but to this day, I think the that trilogy is still my favorite, and really kind of set the stage for what I like to read now.
It's a very beloved trilogy for a reason. It's got a lot of
Yeah.
excellent aspects to it. Would you say then that that is what makes good speculative fiction to you? Like that emotional connection to a much wider world? Or what would you argue for you is important in a work of speculative?
Well, that definitely does it for me. I think it, it's interesting. It's a really tough question to answer because I feel like if I knew what makes good speculative fiction, I would like have cracked some kind of secret code, you know? But I do think that there's a power in speculative fiction that I haven't found a lot in non-speculative fiction of like helping you understand yourself and the world around you by making something strange, if that makes sense, or like externalizing it in a way that like this is not possible in the slightest. But it like almost encourages you to think outside the box, rewire your brain, and like learn something about what the world around us is like, if that makes sense. So I do feel like if there is that kind of immediate tie to a character that you can empathize with, or maybe even like that frustrates you or something, it's still that resonance to me. That's what really makes it work. I think the stories that I've really gravitated to in MetaStellar and other publications are the ones that have that grounding, and that kind of, I don't want to say like didactic tone, because like I think that's not exactly what I mean, but like something where you can something to latch onto, if that makes sense.
Sort of like mythologies, like how mythology exists in some way to explain an aspect of the world, but it does through a fantastical narrative.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think to some extent, a lot of speculative fiction could be like your modern myth making type of exercise. I think of stuff like in the canon, like the hero's journey, like in Wizard of Earthsea, but then even like more modern takes on post-apocalyptic stuff. I don't know. It really runs the gamut, right? Like I think recently one of my favorite books that I've ever read is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, and it's like it plays with perspective and um, flipping the script on what a post-apocalyptic narrative could look like in a way that's very personalizing, but also just like earth. I it's just a pun for anybody who's read it, but like earth shattering. It's just like, yeah, I think I'm rambling a little bit, but to me
Oh,
that
that's right.
if there's something to tether you to a greater understanding of yourself, I think that's the real power that speculative fiction has.
I agree. One of the first pieces of writing advice that I ever remember receiving is that the more ungrounded your setting is, the more grounded the characters have to be, almost.
Mm,
If you're writing literary fiction, you can sort of getting away with slightly un less human characters because the setting is so recognizable. But the second you put people in space in a fantasy land, you need them to be as human as possible. Otherwise, there's nothing for the reader, almost.
yeah, that's great advice. I totally agree, 100%.
So obviously speculative fiction, very broad. And it sounds like you've had experience, you've read all over, like you mentioned magical realism, which is great. And obviously fantasy and science fiction are both huge genres. You've published across all different areas. And you've also done definitely some works which sort of combine, say, sci-fi with fantasy and some of the harder and softer elements. Um, do you think that the same thing draws you to these different areas? And what, if anything, interests you in the overlap between, say, science fiction and fantasy?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I was participating in a book club recently where someone had the hot take that science fiction is also fantasy, which was quite a sweeping statement, and I don't completely disagree. But I think my sweet spot really is in that kind of like, you know, I tend to write stories that have some kind of tinge of reality or basis in reality as a setting. I don't go for the full fantastical um, so it's harder for me to write a secondary world story because I just get caught up in all the mechanics of it. My sweet spot is really like, is there something recognizable to me personally?
Mhm.
And I think that's where science fiction and fantasy kind of blend. So my story in MetaStellar, for example, it's about a girl who creates little pocket universes and eats them.
Yeah.
But it's set against this backdrop of like just a normal you know, setting. I always imagined it happening on like a college campus, but that didn't make it into the story. It's just like normal. You go like they're sitting outside and then they go to her apartment and like it happens and
It's just a date
so
that she's
it's
eating
just
universes.
yes, 100%. Yeah. Um, so I've had the most success with those probably because it feels the most authentic to me. I would say my other story that really plays with that is the one in the Dread Machine called Grams, where a kind of service industry worker, brings home his grandmother's after she has passed away, and she's packed up in like a peat pellet essentially, and plants start to grow out of it, but the plants starts to go awry. And I think that's kind of like there's science fiction-y elements to it, botany, science, environmental aspects of things, but it's really fantastical at the end of the day. So that kind of overlap is my sweet spot, I think.
That makes sense. Grams is actually the story I was thinking about when I wrote this
Oh,
question in the
nice.
first place. I really enjoyed reading it, and I thought it was so interesting how you did that sort of combination, how it's sort of unsure it's difficult to categorize.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, that's great.
Loved it. Do you think you would ever branch out into like branching out makes it sound like you're writing in a constricted way, and that's not what I mean. But do you think
Hmm.
that you would ever want to go down, for example, something with harder science fiction or a fantasy with more world building? Is that something on an intellectual level you would be interested in, even if it's not like what
Yes.
feels authentic?
Yeah, I think so. I have written a couple of fantasy like secondary world stories, and actually the only reason I started writing after like a long hiatus when I used to do it more in college was because I wanted to start. This is so silly. Maybe less silly now that like Dungeon Crawler Carl is so popular, but like I wanted to write my D&D campaign. So I was like
So does everyone, I feel.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Uh, so definitely not opposed to it, and I think fantasy is more comfortable for me. I have this year really been trying to read more hard sci-fi because I feel like that's an area that I just don't like. I just don't feel comfortable doing hard sci-fi very well. Um, and I honestly I don't read a ton of it, so I've been pushing myself to try and get a little better at that. So yes, intellectually, I'm very interested. Will that happen? Not sure.
Did you manage to write your D&D campaign?
I actually wrote out the entire, like I outlined the entire what would become the first book. So grandiose of me, right? And I had written several chapters, and I remember feeling like, oh, this is really fun. This is like, I don't think it's bad. Definitely, not worth anybody ever seeing it, but um. And then I just started to lose steam. I started like getting more into short fiction. I think, I read a lot of advice that was like, if you actually want to be a writer, you should practice on, shorter things first and then see if you can improve that way. And I started getting, it was kind of serendipitous. I started getting a lot more ideas at the same time. And so, yeah, I kind of leaned into it and put the book on the back burner and just invested my time in writing short stuff, which has proven very rewarding. I love it. So,
What would you say for you mechanically are the differences then between writing shorter stuff and longer?
well, this may not be very good advice or anything, but with shorter stuff, unless I know where it's going to end from the beginning, I typically just kind of write until and like stream of consciousness. Like I don't outline. I don't really like maybe I want some to hit some specific story beats, but it's a lot easier for me to understand it as a whole and like go back and insert stuff later that fills it out. Um, with the longer work that I was working on, I really had to like sit down and think like, okay, this has to happen and then this has to happen because there were multiple points of view, there were multiple characters that needed to be in certain places, and so it was like very much more of a mechanical process for me. Whereas like with most of my short stories, I've just kind of let them evolve organically as they have, as it's come to me, and then like tried to retrofit a structure onto it later.
Do you think you'd go back to trying to write more novels? I feel like so often the novel is sort of upheld as like this great thing to aspire to, but I personally have always
Yeah,
preferred stories. But do you think that you're happy as a short story writer? Do you still yearn for the novel?
I I think yeah, I mean I think I'm really happy focusing on short form pieces. I think for a couple reasons. The first is that like I feel like um it's just easier to explore a fully cohesive idea in, a small chunk of writing. And I have a lot of them, and so I just want to keep doing that, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, I think I would go back to writing a novel if the right idea was there. I do have an idea for one that kind of dovetails with the story that I'm working on right now. But the story is first priority. So yeah, if the right idea comes along, for sure. But I'm really enjoying it. I do wish that more people gave short fiction a chance. I think there's something really like rewarding I find in sitting down with a piece, being transported completely, and then 30 minutes, 45 minutes later, it's done. You know, and I think that's a really special and really hard to do thing. And I certainly am not an expert, but I love reading the work of other people who maybe have been doing this for longer. um, you know, so I do wish it got a little bit more love.
No, 100%. I find that it's always the short stories that stick with me the most, almost. Partly because they are
Mhm.
so short, so there's so little that there's always so much left over that you don't have answers for, and then you finish it and you're sort
Yeah,
of there and you're like, well, this is gonna haunt me for the rest of my life. And that's good stuff.
exactly.
This is quite a personal question, so you don't have to answer it. If
That's
you're not
okay.
into it, I can cut this bit out. But would you say that there are any recurring aspects of your life that maybe not literally, but like thematically recur in your writing?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. Well, other than I don't know about I think there's the stuff that I'm drawn to, like the idea of something about the main character being special or, the key to unlocking a deeper secret within the universe that shows up sometimes. Um, Maybe not so much in the stuff that I've published, or had the privilege of having been selected for magazines, but lately I've been noticing a theme of like physical touch, that has kind of manifested in a way that I wasn't expecting. Um, I have a story that I'm hoping will be selected for something where like that becomes a crucial piece of how this character starts to change. And then another piece where that is like the entire thing that keeps them going. Like they cannot never not be touching. um, I think that's one. And then the idea of like found family, I think is really important to me. Um, and has come through in different ways. But yeah, I'm not sure. You're gonna make me go back through and see if there's anything that I've missed in my own stuff.
It's also
I
you
think
have something
I
that
do.
you read and you look at it and you're like, oh, this is saying something about me, actually.
Yeah, 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 exactly. I feel like everything that I've written to some extent has come from the like state of mind that I'm in at the time. Like it is very one to one. I transitioned to a new job a couple years ago, and like, the things that I was thinking about had to change, like just from day to day. And I do, and like my routine changed. And one of the stories that I was just talking about is all about being trapped in a subway station. It's like the subway station that I go to every day. Um, so I, it is kind of like the connection between my personal life and what I'm writing. Well, I don't think I'm ever in the story, but the frame of mind that I have around it is always like, oh, I know why I wrote that, it's very clear to me where all my stories come from. Yeah.
Mhm. Cool. And I mean, in some ways, that's sort of what makes writing so human, isn't it? That we are always our own tools of writing, and that means that we're always going to
Yeah.
put ourselves in whatever we've written.
Yeah. 100%. And I feel like, you know, it's maybe that's why I think that's why another reason why I am focusing on the short fiction right now, as opposed to longer stuff, because it helps me work through some of the things that I am feeling or thinking about, in a way that's not constrained by trying to like, shoehorn them into a structure that I've already like spent so much time outlining and mechanically putting together. So
It's sort of a freer kind of form in some
yes,
because of that. Like you were saying,
yes,
just not having
100%.
the structure necessarily beforehand.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. And now, just as a final thing, are there any works of speculative fiction that you would say you think everybody should read?
Yes. You emailed me this question before, and I did put some time and thought into it. So I mentioned the fifth season already. I think that is easily the best speculative fiction book that I've read in the past 5 years, just hands down. Love it to death. And I think everyone should read it because of the way that it like flips the script on the typical like sci-fi fantasy divide. Like it's very much a work of fantasy, but it like plays with your expectation of what fantasy is in a really cool way. It's like starts at what you think is the end, but it's actually the beginning. It's so good. Um, the other one that I've read recently that really floored me was called Strange Beasts of China, by a Chinese author named Yan Ge. And it was written back in the late 90s, I want to say, but I think it only appeared in print recently in English. And that was a really cool kind of like exactly my taste of like some tinge of our reality, but something weird is happening. And it causes the characters to like confront their own biases about themselves, which is great. And it's like got this really sardonic sense of humor, and it's written almost like an anthropological study. And yeah, it's great. Highly recommend. Um, the other book that really I think start like inspired me to like that kind of speaks to my taste was a book that I read a long time ago of short stories called The View from the Seventh Layer by Kevin Brockmeyer. I still think about those stories, and I think it's like very slipstreamy and weird. Just great stuff. And then the last one I'll say is Piranesi, because of how Susanna Clark like it's like a perfectly paced book. Just like it never flags, you're never bored. Every time you think you know what's happening, she's like, here's something else. And it's like, I felt so smart reading it, but then at the end of the day, being like, oh my God, she's a genius, you know? So those are my four. Fifth season, Strange Beasts of China, The View from the Sea are my four. I also am reading like right before we got on this call, I'm like got 10 pages left. I'm reading I Who Have Never Known Men. Have you ever heard of this book?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it yet.
Oh my God, it is a trip. It is like very similar to the kind of like mystery. Well, the mystery is different, but like a similar feeling as Piranesi, but like much darker.
Okay.
Um, and that's also a really good one. So if I could sneak in fourth and a half book recommendation, that's what I would do.
Because I've been meaning to read that one for so long. Okay, now I have
Oh,
to
you
actually
got
look
it.
at
It's
it.
so good. So good. It's
Okay.
very grim, I will tell you. Very grim.
Sometimes you just have to do that, though. You have to be in the right headspace, but
Yeah.
once you are, they're so good. Okay. Well, definitely
Yes.
have to look at that. And also, I haven't read I've read Pain and Nancy Bells and that I haven't read the others. So I
Mm.
huge reading list now. I love how
Yay.
passionate you are about these. Like it's so clear you
Yeah.
love them. And it's
I
really
well the cool thing is that they were all well except for the view from the seventh layer. I think I just found that in a bookstore one time, but they were all recommendations. So I am happy to be paying it forward
you're
and
passing it on.
recommending those books to others. Yes, exactly. So
Wonderful. Well, that's the end of our interview. Thank you so much. This was really lovely to talk to you.
yeah, same. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.